we're going to be very, very careful about reopening any international travel, including the United States, before we feel that it is time.
Politicians are focusing on the border as the deal that keeps it closed to non-essential traffic expires next week. We're learning more about outbreaks at 3 greenhouse operations in our region. This as the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers says that they're trying to make things safer for workers. I'm Chris Ensing. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're taking a closer look at the outbreaks at 3 greenhouses in our region. But first, we want to break down the latest numbers of COVID-19 in Windsor-Essex. 6 new cases confirmed today, which brings the total up to 732 since this pandemic started. Now, that includes 15 outbreaks at long-term care and retirement homes. 2 more people died today, according to the health unit, a woman in her 90s and another woman in her 80s. Both were residents of long-term care homes. That brings us to 61 people who have died of COVID-19 in Windsor-Essex. 287 resolved cases with 1,774 tests still pending results. And we're hearing more greenhouse workers testing positive with COVID-19 in our region. Health officials pointing to bunkhouses as the main area of spread for an outbreak in Chatham-Kent. At the same time, the federal government is now making it easier for temporary foreign workers who lost their job to move to another facility. The CBC's Jason Vio joins us live with more on all of this. Jason, we want to start with the greenhouse workers that have tested positive for COVID-19. What do we know about that?
Well, Chris, we've learned late this afternoon that some employees at Lakeside Produce in Leamington have tested positive for COVID-19, 13 workers there since April 1st. But we also know that most of them are local workers from the local workforce and have recovered. But what we don't know is exactly when all of these workers tested positive, as the health unit just released that information jointly with the company again late this afternoon. Another greenhouse in Leamington experiencing similar problems, High Park. It's a cannabis grower there. They experienced their first positive COVID-19 case among staff members, and that was reported to the health unit just yesterday. And a company spokesperson says 12 co-workers there who may have come into contact with that person have been notified and are self-isolating at home for 2 weeks. They say the facility was also cleaned and sanitized, and they also say no other workers are showing symptoms of COVID-19 at this point. The company won't say, though, how this person is doing due to privacy concerns, because that worker is from a third-party agency. Now, at another greenhouse, this time in Chatham-Kent, the health unit there is calling it a serious COVID-19 outbreak. It's at Green Hill Produce. Before, you'll remember we told you they had 47 workers who had tested positive there. We're now learning that number has reached 66, according to public health officials. But we know that all but 3 migrant workers have recovered and returned to work as of this weekend. Most of those cases are linked to bunk houses, though, for migrant workers. The health unit says that housing meets all current standards. Still, the Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers says there are challenges and they're exploring enhanced safety measures.
I think it's also going to be necessary to look at workplace planning with a view to developing smaller cohorts within your operation, so that you have smaller groups of employees that both, in the case of temporary foreign workers, would work, live, and travel all together as a unit and have a separation from other units. So that in the case that we're dealing with future pandemics, there is this separation between these groups of workers, and you're less likely then to risk the health and safety of your entire workforce.
And to give you a sense of those cohorts that she's kind of talking about, she says typically farms and greenhouses will group those workers in groups of 10 or 20, and she again wants to see those numbers lower to help with the spread of viruses that may come down the road. Now, Chatham-Kent's medical officer of health, though, says when it comes to bunk houses and how they're set up and some of the issues there, he says it's less about changing the physical space and more about changing behaviors when it comes to physical distancing and personal protective equipment.
Now, speaking about changes there, Jason, the federal government, they made an announcement today that will help growers and migrant workers. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there's a new temporary policy in place, the federal government says, effective immediately, that would essentially drastically reduce the time it takes for temporary foreign workers to find a new workplace once they're here in Canada. Many in the spring might have lost their jobs, either when they got here, and it's difficult sometimes to find a new workplace, and that can take some time. And in many cases, they're unable to return home because of the travel restrictions that are in place. So if they wanted to find another workplace, they would have to reapply for that work permit. That could take upwards of 10 weeks. But under this new temporary program, they say that could take 10 days or less. But one local immigration lawyer who reviewed this announcement today has mixed feelings about it.
I think it's a Band-Aid that's designed to kind of stop the bleeding, but there are so many other issues that have to be resolved. We have to make sure that these workers are safe in the plants that they're working or on the farms that they're working. But I think it's a step in the right direction to help these farmers and in the agricultural industry to get the workforce that they need.
And he went on to say, given how important these migrant workers are to people's food security, it's important that we take care of them when they get ill and offer them the proper supports and services and ensure they're isolated if that were to happen. Chris.
Thanks for that, Jason. Well, the people who are still able to cross the U.S.-Canada border found a nice surprise today in Windsor. The U.S. Consulate General of Toronto personally thanking them for their work. This as politicians debate what happens next at the international border. That's a $100 gift card in that envelope, passed to someone heading to work in Michigan. The man behind the mask, U.S. Consul General Greg Stanford.
It really is just a very, very modest sort of expression of our deep gratitude for all that they're doing.
Each gift card tied to an independent restaurant in Windsor-Essex. 900 cards for healthcare workers that Detroit hospitals say they couldn't operate the same without.
And to me, the selfless acts of these individuals really embody all that is right about the U.S.-Canada relationship.
In Windsor, a focus on the work of the people. In Ottawa, it shifts to the border they cross.
Are you discussing any changes in the current status right now?
I found during the NAFTA negotiations that negotiations are best not conducted in public, but let me just assure Canadians that the health and safety of Canadians is first and foremost. Our government is taking a cautious approach, and we're working effectively.
This is not negotiation. This is whether there's changes on the table. What are they?
We are taking a very cautious approach to the health and safety of Canadians. A very collaborative discussion is happening.
The deal to keep the border closed to non-essential traffic expires in 8 days. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens doesn't see a return to normal soon, but expects some changes.
But I think what you would likely start to see is some sort of harmonization at the border with respect to the start of manufacturing.
The Prime Minister says the government will be careful about easing restrictions.
Preventing transmission from outside of Canada into Canada once we have controlled the spread within Canada will be an essential part of ensuring that we don't fall back into a second wave that could be as serious as this wave we're going through, or even more so.
Detroit has been punched hard by COVID-19. 9,897 confirmed cases since the pandemic started. 1,213 people dead.
Oh, thank you so much.
Through it all, people from Windsor-Essex crossing international borders to the front line.
I'm comforted to know that there are such dedicated, skilled, and compassionate people who are helping those most in need.
Now, I sat down with the U.S. Consul General today asking him how the relationship between the United States and Canada may have changed during this pandemic, including his thoughts on the actions of United States President Donald Trump. You can look for that interview to air tomorrow. A note tonight about a story that we brought you yesterday. We told you about the allegations against John Anthony Clark Nabin. Now, he was abusive to students, and last week the Ontario College of Teachers revoked his teaching license. One of his former students shared her story. Today, she reached out to clarify that one of the incidents she described between her and Nabin did not take place in 2012, as we told you yesterday. In fact, it had happened in 2015. Ontario's state of emergency due to the coronavirus pandemic has now been extended into early June. It's been 8 weeks since Premier Doug Ford announced a shutdown of almost all businesses and society as we know it. Today, he teased some good news to come later this week.
On Thursday, we will share more details about the next stage of reopening our province. We'll be reopening more low-risk workplaces, seasonal businesses, and essential services. And it will be stage one of 3 stages. So that's very important that the people of Ontario have all followed the protocols, and we've hit stage 1 on Thursday. So we'll have more details as that rolls around.
Stage 1 of reopening, according to the province, also means opening some outdoor spaces and allowing essential gatherings of a limited number of people. Ford mentioned today that he's talking to health officials about the possibility of allowing gatherings of up to 10 people. We're expecting more details again on Thursday. Politicians sat for a special session today at Queen's Park, one that included the first question period in 2 months. It was dominated by the NDP's calls for a full public inquiry into the government's response to COVID-19. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the details.
Springtime at Queen's Park, but a springtime session like no other. Inside the legislature, some traditions remain as normal, but as MPPs enter the chamber, you see how things have changed. For the victims of COVID-19, a moment of silence.
It is now time for oral questions.
During Ontario's first question period in 2 months, MPPs spread out in a show of physical distancing. There is zero heckling, and naturally, every question is about the pandemic.
Speaker, families with loved ones in long-term care are demanding answers, and they deserve those answers. And they deserve a full public inquiry that is nonpartisan to give them those answers.
Premier Doug Ford doesn't commit.
We're going to review the system, a system that's been broken for decades. And I can promise you one thing, we are going to fix it.
So I put this question to the Premier.
SARS killed 44 people in Ontario, and there was a public inquiry. Elizabeth Wetlaufer killed 8 people in long-term care homes. There was a public inquiry. At Walkerton, 6 people died. There was a public inquiry. At Ipperwash, the OPP killed 1 First Nations demonstrator. There was a public inquiry. So far, COVID-19 has killed nearly 1,800 people in Ontario. Why won't you commit to a public inquiry?
Well, what we want to do is make sure we get through this and support people in long-term care and right across this province. We're going to have reviews right across the board, no matter if it's a procurement system or if it's long-term care. We'll make sure we review it from top to bottom.
Reviews are not enough for Andrea Horvath. She says an inquiry would go further.
It won't be constrained by the interests of the governing party. It will be not only public and transparent and independent, but it will also pull in, as all public inquiries in the past in Ontario have, the voices of people who have actually been impacted and affected.
MPPs are next due to return here to Queen's Park a week from today. They're to hold question period twice weekly until early June. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
People living and working in long-term care homes would have been a priority during the COVID-19 pandemic if they were under the review of Ontario Health Teams, a system overseen by the province. That's according to the organization representing the province's nurses. Lisa Shing explains.
Each day I wake up, I have no clue what the next morning is going to be. If it's her last day, I have no idea how much time she has left.
Sherry Zielinski's mother, Margaret, lives at Orchard Villa, one of the long-term care homes in the province hit hardest by COVID-19. 74 residents have died. 52 are currently infected. Zielinski's mom tested positive about a month ago.
She's by herself. She thinks we've abandoned her. She doesn't know where we are. So it's a lot harder for her.
Orchard Villa is just one of 180 nursing homes dealing with an outbreak. The military has been called in to help there and at 4 others. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario says the outcome could have been a lot different. If the province had more oversight in the care of residents, it says they would have been tested faster and staff would have had masks a lot sooner.
It would not have been an afterthought.
The RNAO released a report looking at how to improve healthcare post-pandemic. The 13 recommendations encourage a move from hospital-focused to community-based care. That includes mandating Ontario health teams to include long-term care homes so they work with other health providers in the community.
No doubt that we would have lost precious lives, even if long-term care would have been fantastic, but much less. Much less.
Most of the teams that have come forward already as local Ontario health teams do have long-term care included as part of their group.
According to the Ministry of Health, about half of the 24 health teams include one or more long-term care homes. The province says it'll continue to encourage those partnerships. Sherry Zielinski says that won't help her situation, but hopefully others.
We're not sleeping, we're calling every day. Our life is consumed of my mom.
Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
The health unit here in Windsor-Essex has announced that any Indigenous people in the region can now be assessed for COVID-19. The unit is expanding screening and testing for First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people. It's done in partnership with the local office of the Southwest Ontario Aboriginal Access Centre. The goal is to remove barriers.
It's really important that we broaden our strategies to address the health equities for Indigenous people. We want them to feel safe, comforted, and know that we provide the best quality care and understand where they come from as Indigenous people and the disparities they may have faced in the past.
SOHAC is a centre that offers culturally appropriate health services for Indigenous people. The health unit will support the centre by providing swabs for COVID-19. All Indigenous families are welcome, and you don't need to be a client to access a test. Screening will be done by phone. Based on that, a testing appointment will be set up afterwards. Chatham-Kent police say a phony story about COVID-19 meant 2 of their officers had to needlessly spend a week off work. So last month, a 55-year-old woman who had been drinking collided with a parked car, according to police. While dealing with her, the woman's husband told the officers that she had been diagnosed with COVID-19 by her doctor. Police say the officers were immediately relieved of their duties and sent home to self-isolate. A cruiser and 2 portable radios were also taken out of service so they could disinfect. Later, police learned the woman had never tested positive. Her 55-year-old husband has now been arrested and charged with fraud, mischief, and obstructing police. Take a look up in the sky there, eh? What a show. You might have seen it earlier today if you were along the riverfront. We captured a few pictures and got some sent in as well. This from Michael Molnar. Now, those are the US-80 Blue Angels flying over Detroit today in solidarity with frontline workers. Fitting, given that it's International Nurses Day, and we were able to enjoy the show from our side of the river as well. Take a look at these as we head to break. Colette Kennedy comes up next with the forecast. And joining us now for a live look at the weather is Colette Kennedy. Colette, we got a look at the Blue Angels flying above today as they did their pass in support of healthcare workers on the other side of the border, but it was nice to take that in. It was sunny outside too. That was nice.
Yeah, perfect conditions for them and their flight. Some pretty good visibility there. And you know, the thing is, we've got this cool air, so clear skies, they're nice during the day. We get the sunshine, but overnight they're allowing these temperatures to really fall off. So the old record low for this date was 1.1, 1941. We have a new one from this morning, 0.3, just barely above freezing. But yeah, new record for May 12th, 2020 for Windsor because of the cool air we've been seeing, and likely another record coming in overnight tonight. These are our averages. It wasn't a bad day. We're the hot spot in Ontario at 14.5. But tonight, again, with clearer skies, we have the frost advisory. If you do have any of these plants that you can still bring in or you can protect, here we go again. Tonight is another opportunity to do that. Our temperature is still holding here, Chatham-Kent, 14 degrees, whereas it's 6 in Sarnia, cooler towards London as well. That northwesterly flow, it's not just these winds, it's how gusty they've been. So these are the sustained. We know they've been gusting more than that. Those will ease overnight tonight. There are the clearer conditions we have on the satellite and radar imagery, but over to the east, that's where they still, again today, had some wet flurries to the north, up into cottage country. But what happens with what's going on over the next 24 hours, we'll say, are clear and cool conditions. Carry on. That's why it may be a record tonight. The sun comes back out tomorrow. It is going to be a nice day for most of the day. You can see the clouds trying to make their way in. They're going to have to hold off. But as we get towards Wednesday evening, overnight into Thursday, not only will we see the rain coming in into Thursday morning, chance we could have some thunderstorms. Looks like a bit of a pause later in the day on Thursday. It's only a pause. The rain comes back in. And again, still a risk of some thunderstorms overnight into Friday. And some, at times, the rain may be heavy, so 25 to as much as 40 millimeters, especially locally if we do get some thunderstorm activity. And then it will clear eventually out on Friday. So finally, but a couple of days, the temperatures soar, but we're going to be seeing the wet conditions as well. There are your temperatures overnight tonight, below freezing. 15 degrees tomorrow, so similar to today, in fact, with that sunshine. Thursday, though, 18. Friday, 21, into the holiday weekend. At this point, Chris, Saturday is looking kind of like the best day.
Perfect. That's okay. We could take a nice Saturday for once. That's not a problem at all.
And mild through the period, so that's good too.
We're laughing. This is great. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Now, coming up, we're going to take a look at how COVID-19 is affecting Pelee Island, specifically that ferry run. Pelee Island Council wants the province to extend the sailing hours of the Pelee Islander 2. Currently, the ferry only runs 3 times a week, only carries commercial traffic. The capacity is 9 vehicles and 12 people because of COVID-19 restrictions. The township wants it to run every day on its usual schedule. The mayor says the other ferry, the Pelee Islander, is running 7 days a week. That's the only ferry carrying island residents. But the mayor says there's a lot more demand than that to get back and forth to the mainland. So they want the larger ship, the Pelee Islander 2, to carry walk-on passengers as well. One of Canada's best-known singers has apologized for a message he posted on social media yesterday that critics say is racist and rife with misinformation. Bryan Adams wrote on Instagram that he was supposed to be doing shows in London, but, quote, thanks to some bat-eating, wet market, animal-selling, virus-making, greedy bastards, the whole world is now on hold. He also told them to go vegan. Today, he said he apologized to anyone who took offense, writing that he wanted to have a rant about the horrible animal cruelty in those wet markets and promote veganism. However, Bryan's original post has not been deleted. Critics say that those kind of comments from a celebrity could fuel a rising tide of hate against Asian Canadians. Scientists say even the entire world population was vegan, we'd still have diseases that are transmitted from animals. A shortage of quality bamboo has prompted Calgary Zoo to prepare to return a pair of giant pandas to China. Disruptions in shipment due to the global pandemics have meant the bear's bamboo supply is of such poor quality that they just won't eat it. Food insecurity means that the decade-long stay expected when the pair arrived in Canada in 2013 from China will have to be cut short. 6:29 p.m. and that's it for CBC Windsor News. Before we go, another look at the air show that we got to see today along the riverfront. Thanks for watching. Make sure that you and your family stay safe.